Let's go to Kara Scannell right now, who just came from inside the courtroom of this incredibly historic day. Kara?
Hey, Jake. Yeah, so, we thought that this was ending at the end of the day without a verdict, and then the judge came back on the bench. After saying he was going to excuse the jury, he returned at 4:36 saying the jury had another note. It was time-stamped at 4:20. They had a verdict, and they needed an extra 30 minutes. The mood changed entirely inside the courtroom. Trump had been laughing with his lawyer, Todd Blanche. They'd been talking a lot. He was smiling. It appeared they thought that this day was ending without a verdict. And then after the judge had read that note, everything changed. He became very still. He had his arms folded across his chest. It became a much different situation inside that courtroom. And then we waited for the jury to enter. When they came in, they filed into the courtroom. None of them looked over at Donald Trump. That is normal. They normally don't. But they all walked toward their seats, took their seats, and then the court security officer asked them to read the verdict. So the foreman stood up with a microphone, and he was asked for each count if they had reached a verdict and what it was. And he went through all 34 counts saying guilty. Then after that, the court security officer asked them if this was a unanimous verdict by all the jurors. They answered audibly in the courtroom saying that yes, it was. The judge asked if any of the parties wanted this individually polled. Todd Blanche, Trump's lawyer, said he did want the jurors individually polled. So they went through each juror, each of the 12 jurors, one by one, and they each confirmed that their verdict on all 34 counts was guilty. Then the judge had thanked the jury for their service. He excused them and said that he wanted to talk to them afterwards, asking them to stick around for a little bit because he wanted to thank them individually for their service over these past 7 weeks of this trial since jury selection began. So they were waiting in the back room for the judge to go and discuss with them. And then the judge sent the sentencing date for July 11th. And then at that point, he said if there was nothing else, he was going to excuse them. At this point, Donald Trump stands up. We can now finally get a good look at his face. His face was red. He looked upset. He had a frown on his face. And as he walked toward the well that separates where he's sitting into the common area, the galley where the rest of us are, his son Eric Trump was sitting in that first seat. And so Donald Trump reached out to him, shook his hand vigorously, and then as he was walking past him, Eric Trump patted his father on the back. So kind of the most humane moment we've seen in this trial, this personal, emotional interaction between the father and son as Trump then walked down the center aisle of the courtroom and out into the hallway, where then he spoke to the cameras. So, it was certainly a historic moment and quite a dramatic moment, coming very unexpected at the end of this day, which had looked like it was heading toward there not being a verdict. So certainly a surprise to Donald Trump and his team, and something that they did not see coming based on the change in their demeanor, and certainly a serious moment for Trump, where he did look like he was upset with the outcome of this trial.
And Kara, tell us, if you would, about the jurors, these 12 Americans, 12 Manhattanites, in addition to the 6 alternates who were asked to consider, give up their lives for several weeks, consider a very complicated case and charges, came back fairly quickly with this unanimous guilt verdict of 34 guilty charges, making for the first time in the history of the United States a former president of the United States a convicted felon. When they were sitting there as the foreperson read the verdict, when they were being polled, each one of them, all 12, saying that they agreed with the guilty verdict on all 34 counts, did they look at the defendant, the former president? Did they have any emotions on their face? You said earlier that the president was looking at them. What were they doing with their faces?
When the foreperson was reading the verdict, the jurors, I'd say half of them were looking straight down at the ground and others were looking at the judge. I didn't see any of them look at Donald Trump. And, as you noted, he had craned his neck so he could look at them as they were being individually polled. None of them appeared to make any eye contact with him while they were sitting in the box throughout this whole reading of the verdict, both when the foreperson read it, when they were individually polled, and then when they left. So they did not appear to look at him at any time entering or leaving the courtroom. And as he was watching them today, none of them appeared to look back at him. And this jury is all made up of New Yorkers, but the foreperson is from Ireland, an immigrant here. There's a well-educated jury. There were a couple of lawyers on the jury, some other executives. So representative of New York in many ways, and a jury of Trump's peers, as he is a native New Yorker himself. But there appeared to be no emotion either displayed on the faces of the jurors. They were all pretty straight-faced, no expression throughout this whole process. And it is something that, they knew coming into this that this was going to be a significant historical trial. And throughout the trial, none of them had betrayed any sense of what they thought of the evidence or how they were reacting to any of the witnesses. They really kept straight faces. I've often joked they've had poker faces on this whole time. You really were not getting any revelations from them throughout this trial, Jake.
Very wise. What about the judge, Juan Merchan, who has been attacked over and over by the defendant, former President Trump, now a convicted felon, by his allies in the media? What was his reaction? And also, if you saw any reaction of the defense attorneys or the prosecution, what they did during this rather surreal moment in American history.
The judge had brought the jurors in. He's a soft-spoken man, and he was even soft-spoken when he came in and had said to them, initially he came in and said, I'm going to excuse the jury at 4:30 today. I'll be right back. And he left the bench. There's about 15 minutes left in the day. He came back in at 4:36 and he said, I have a note. There is a verdict. But he has maintained this kind of cool composure the entire time. Then when he brought the jurors in, and while we're waiting in this period for the jury to come in, it is almost pin silent in that courtroom. Everyone being on edge, everyone waiting for the door to the right of the judge to open and for those jurors to walk in. There was no discussion amongst the parties as we were waiting in this moment. Then when the jury came in, the judge essentially hands it over to the court officer. He asked them initially at first, I have your note. Is this accurate? Is this your note that you have a verdict? The foreman confirms. And then the judge hands it off to one of the court officers who does the individual verdict reading, asking the foreperson each time for count one, how do you find? And then he'd say guilty across all 34 of those counts. It was only after all of that was completed, the judge then thanked the jurors for their service, said he wanted to talk to them, said he couldn't talk about the case, couldn't talk about the facts, but he just wanted to talk to them because he knew that they had sacrificed a lot to be members of this jury hearing evidence for the past 6 weeks in what is undoubtedly a very high-profile case. And these jurors know they know where they are, they know the attention on this. As you'll remember from jury selection, there was a lot of attention on whether jurors felt that they were being too exposed by the idea that people knew that they were here for jury duty. So he wanted to take the jury back and to meet with them. Now, this jury has been essentially anonymous. Only the lawyers have known their names. Even the foreperson signing the verdict sheet was just supposed to sign with his juror number. And the judge had done that out of protection for this jury. So we do not know if any of them are going to speak. The judge told them that all of the restrictions he has placed on them have been lifted, that they are able to speak if they want to, but he also told them that they don't have to speak if they don't want to. Now, also, I would say the prosecution, as is pretty typical, they kept straight faces throughout the reading of the verdict, and they left the room without saying anything or showing any emotion, Jake.